My name is Justin Gage, and you're tuned in to the Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions podcast with your host, Jason Woodbury.
Thanks for joining us today on Transmissions. Our guest this week on the program is Roberto Carlos Lange, better known as Helado Negro. He's got a really wonderful new album out on 4AD now called Far In, and it's filled with these songs that blend synthy, experimental pop tones with folkier ballads and some dance songs. It's a really wonderful album, and I had a really good time hanging out with him to discuss it. He joined me to talk about his time in Marfa during the pandemic and retrace his journey through music, discussing the artistic freedom that's really intrinsic to his process along the way. I really enjoyed speaking with him, and I think y'all are going to enjoy this episode. We are just one show away from the conclusion of this season of Transmission, so I want to thank you for spending time with us. We've got a lot of talks in the archive, though, you can dive into during the break if you need them. Conversations with people like Yasmin Williams, Jim Jarmusch, Tom Sharpling, Margot Price, Angel Bat Daweed, many more. If you dig the show and you like what we're doing, you can help us out by posting about it on your social media, or you can take your support a step further and pledge a couple bucks a month to help us keep making it over on Patreon. You can just look up Aquarium Drunkard on Patreon. Okay, coming up, my talk with Helado Negro. But first, a word from our sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Check them out at betterhelp.com/aquariumdrunkard. The best way to think about therapy is through the idea of thinking about maintenance. We get our cars tuned up to prevent bigger issues down the road. We get annual checkups at the doctor and go to the gym to maintain our physical wellness. We do chores regularly to avoid a giant mess of a house and gross bugs. Going to therapy is like this. It's routine maintenance for your mental and emotional wellness, and it helps prevent bigger issues down the line. Going to therapy does not mean something's wrong with you. It means you're investing in yourself to keep your mind healthy. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Why invest in everything else and not your mind? This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Aquarium Drunkard listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/aquariumdrunkard. That's BetterHelp.com/aquariumdrunkard. We thank BetterHelp for sponsoring the show. Roberto, thanks so much for joining us here on Transmissions. It's a real honor to have you. Are you in New York? Is that where I'm speaking to you?
No. I'm in why am I spacing? I'm in Asheville, North Carolina.
How long have you been out there? What brought you out there, rather?
I moved out here in June of this year, late June. And what brought me out here? I'd lived in New York for 15 years, and we were on the we were in Marfa last year for 6 months. I'm sorry, and that time there really reprogrammed our brain to kind of think about living somewhere else. I think there's always like these fantasies, especially when you're touring, and you pass through different towns or different cities, and you like go there and you're like, oh man, I could live here.
Yeah.
There's always something fleeting like that, but then you go home and then there's like all these, your roots are where you're at, right? For us, it was in New York, and so there were so many things already a part of my life. That's where my parents went first. My family moved to New York in the 60s, and then later moved to Florida, and then but I still have a lot of family in New York in the city, and so I didn't grow up there, but going back, it was just familiar because I had been there, before, and so it still felt like roots,
Yeah.
and but being in Asheville now, it's really exciting. It's really exciting to be here because um, the world is beautiful everywhere, and I think it's it's not hard. It's not hard to try. It's just hard to really. Um, it's not hard to try. It's just hard. It's hard to get to discover new things. To find the energy to discover new things as you get older.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I moved to New York when I was 26, and I'm 41 now, and there's like a lifetime
Yeah.
that have happened between then and now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I knew that you had spent time, so you went to Marfa, and then the pandemic hit after you had arrived, and you found yourself basically stuck in Marfa for an extended period of time. You said it was about 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've been to Marfa once, and I was thinking about my experience there, and I was thinking, or rather trying to imagine your experience there, and I thought about how I had such a pre-pandemic time there. You know what I mean? Like, I was there just for a festival. I was there for Marfa Myths, this podcast. We did like a couple episodes with people there, and I was hanging out at the Hotel St. George and interviewing Eileen Miles and eating at like I think it was.
You were on vacation.
I was on vacation. You know what I mean? It was like I ate at the Bad Hombres, this little
The burger.
yeah, and it was just like, yeah, it was so great. It was so nice. And then I thought, like, so what would happen if I did that for the first couple days and then the world locked down and things ended? You know what I mean? And like, it became a completely different thing. I have to imagine that you ended up, what kind of sense were you able to get of the place in your time out there?
I had spent a bunch of time in Marfa previous to that. 2010, I had played a show there. And then later I played Marfa Myths as well later on.
Yeah.
And gone out to visit for this project that I was working on with my wife. It's a project called Kite Symphony that was commissioned by Ballroom Marfa, who puts on Marfa Myths.
Yeah.
And so I was already familiar with like what you're describing. And I had seen it from like 2010 to when we went there, the evolution of the town up until that point in terms of becoming the experience that you were describing, and then us getting there and me already knowing these things, and things just started to lock down.
Yeah.
Especially because of the state park locked down, and I think Marfa is like this stopover for a lot of people who go to Big Bend, like people who are like Texas natives who go for spring break or for summer, that they go on family trips or whatever to Big Bend, and Marfa's like a 2-day stopover for a lot of people. And I think that even, obviously that stopped. And so there wasn't this fluid like frequency of tourism happening. It was just like it became slower and quieter and quieter. And
right.
Freakier for us because it by design, Marfa is like isolated. And
yeah.
And so then as like toilet paper started running out and like all these things were like, damn, like this might be like the last place that's gonna get anything, So it's like as these things run out, what's running out next? And so there was like all these like built-in anxieties to the uncertainty of it all. And then the fact that like I don't think people realize how far west it is, and it's 5 hours from El Paso, and like
yeah, it's a long
towns nearby.
Yeah.
and even like the freakiness of like the nearest hospital was small in comparison. And like if that's servicing like all these people that live in a region, you know, if someone were to get really sick, you would have to get airlifted to El Paso. Like that's just like the
And
reality. That was like,
yeah, that's heavy.
so there was a lot of stuff, but we were trying to, you know, try to just keep it chill and try to keep it real, and grateful that we were there, to be honest. We were Ballroom really supported us in the most generous of ways. They gave us somewhere to live, and really like encouraged us with the project that we were working on, and allowed it to cultivate and grow into something that's ultimately going to be a show next year in January, but like a gallery show. But it you know, we just didn't, we were happy to ride for a while, but we just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, that sense of uncertainty must have been really intense. So that's a project you worked on that with like Rob Mazurek and is it Janine Dara? Am I saying that right? Jean Ann Dara. The stuff that I've heard from that is really,
My
really.
wife did the visual scores.
That's right. Yeah, the two of you were involved in this project. So it must have been great to have a project to focus on. Just in terms of something you could put your mind towards. The stuff I've listened to sounds really, really cool, and it's really fascinating, and the art is beautiful too. So there's that, but yeah, so that undercurrent of sort of dread was just there in the background to some degree.
Absolutely, yeah. There's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the dread was real.
Did you start writing any of the stuff for this new album while you were out there, or did that come a little bit later?
No, it happened there for sure. Parallel to the project to Kite Symphony, I was able to work out of a recording studio in Marfa, which obviously wasn't like the guy who runs it, Gory. It's called Marfa Recording Company, I think it's called.
Mm.
My brain spaces on the exact names, but he, you know, we were able to use it for our project, but then through that time I was able to like be in a studio and then start to just explore. As soon as I'm like in a space like that, I'm like working on one thing, but then other things start to happen, and it happened. I started to write a bunch of songs. I wrote like immediately, like the first few days, I wrote a song on the record called Aguas Frias, and then I wrote Agosto, and I wrote Thank You Forever, and I'm trying to think, finished Gemini and Leo there. And
Was that one that did Gemini and Leo exist before? Is that like an older song? Has that one been sitting for a little bit?
yeah, so the exciting thing was in 2018, as I was finishing This Is How You Smile, like the week that I was finishing it, I was kind of like over working on that record. I was like extremely just like done with it. It was an exhausting process, and I was like, I never want to make a record like this again, process and possibly musically. It was just, there was something about it that just like, I was just like, I was so happy to move on. Like,
Yeah.
like as I was finishing it, I wasn't even finished mixing it. So that last week, I started recording a lot of songs while I was finishing it, and one of the songs I made was Mirror Talk. It's the last song on the record, and that process just kind of just like. But then I was like, okay, let me not self sabotage. Finish this record. Finish this and then
Sure.
later, and then later in 2019, I started doing a lot more studio sessions and started just accumulating a lot of like recordings with friends that I kept inviting over, like my friend Casey Hill, who's on the record, and then my friend Opal Hoyt, who plays on Gemini and Leo, my friend Taja Cheek. She plays bass in a lot of songs, and there's a lot of other folks. And so there was all these seeds that were scattered, and Gemini and Leo was one of those songs that I had, and it was an extremely like abstract, headier, weirder song. And like I was really trying to make it difficult. I was like, oh man, I'm gonna make this like this very like it started to come across like a very arty, like strange song. And I was like, yeah, this is gonna be very, I don't even want to make this a pop song, you know, like I just want it to be like some weird shit. And then I sent this. I sent like the what I had assembled between Opal and myself. Some of the stuff that we had done in the studio. I sent it to my friend J Tram to play drums, and he did drums, and then he sent me a reference after he sent me the stems for the drums, and I just put the drums in the wrong place.
Oh,
And what was exciting about that was like it just changed my mind on the song. I was like, okay, this song is not some weird abstract song. I was like, this song is like, it's just like a normal jam. It's just like it's a it's supposed to be a groovy jam, and so with that in place, I sent it to Jen Wassner, Flock of Dimes, and she played bass over it. And then I had a completely new vision where I just like kind of reoriented everybody's stuff. And prior to me leaving to Marfa, the demo version of like the weirder abstract version of Gemini and Leo, I had sent it to my friend Trey Pollard from Space Bomb,
yeah.
and he had heard a few songs that I was working on. I was just sending stuff. There was like no intention. I wasn't even trying to make a record
Right.
last year. Like all I wanted to do last year was just work on music, and then hopefully this year start working on a record. and so I sent him some songs for him to check out, and then he was like, "Oh man," he's like, "Send me these 4 or 5, I can't remember." And I was like, "Sure." And I just thought that he was gonna like play piano or pedal steel like we've done before, because anytime we've done strings before, him and I had like a long conversation about it and kind of worked out some ideas. And right before I left for Marfa, he sent me those 4 songs, and he's like, "Oh," he's like, "Hey man, I had some extra time after this string session, so I did a bunch of arrangements for all the songs and just recorded them. Here they are. Do whatever you want with them." And I was like, "Oh shit!" So when I got to Marfa, I had like all these pieces and parts, and they just like Gemini and Leo just like
Yeah.
started to appear and assemble.
Can I ask when you originally sort of had envisioned it, when it was in its like more arty, weird shape, was it already a love song sort of for Krista, or Christy, was that already part of it, you know?
Yeah, I think well, it's not necessarily like a. I mean, it's definitely like a jam. That's a loving jam, and
Sure.
it's definitely based around our like us in terms of our astrological signs. It's also like it's a zoom out for sure. It's not just about us too. I think it's like a fictional idea, threaded by like our partnership. So it's kind of like it's a little bit of both. And I think lyrically, I think there wasn't that much developed. I think just like the hook, the Gemini and Leo hook, and then like maybe like a verse or two were assembled, and then as the drums appeared and like I got the bass in there, I was like, let me just go just dive in and make all these songs about some kind of like some galaxy universe space themes and even astrological tie-ins, and I just wanted to have fun like that.
I love that you invoke the idea of sort of cosmic balance, you know? I'm right now, as I did last year during the pandemic, I'm revisiting this book by this writer Jeffrey Kripal, and he's written this book called The Flip, and I'm listening to like an audiobook version of it for another go round. And his sort of argument is basically that the universe is conscious in some sense, you know, and that maybe that consciousness, our brains are part of that consciousness, or you know, kind of whatever. And even if you don't buy that thesis, you know, even if that doesn't, you know, resonate, I think there's something really interesting and beneficial and beautiful about thinking of a person as a galaxy, you know, because it just implies that sense of limitlessness and vast possibility. You know, a person is so many possibilities at once, you know. And so I don't know, I felt like in a weird way I've listened to Gemini and Leo a lot because it's a really good song. It's a real good jam, and it makes me feel good. But it also I love the idea of it being like a love song in multiple ways, or a loving song, as you put it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like that. I do, and I'll I'll subscribe to that for sure. To the people to that idea. I completely agree. I think um even when we're making music and we're like, I think when we're making music, the world is ours. It's our little miniature world.
Yeah.
It's my little miniature world that I live in, and then when I share it, then it becomes a part of like all these different people's little world, and it's still now it's like this tiny world that I've made, and but even with that, it's like it's kind of cool to think about. I guess I start to think about like all these people around me, especially like if you live in New York or wherever, anywhere actually, you're just driving around, there's people everywhere, people doing all these things. And I think about all this stuff all the time, and it can be like crippling sometimes where you're like um concerned with the world all day and all the time. But it also if you can pull out um some of the parts that kind of energize you, like the possibilities of like experiencing as many things as possible, I think that can be a really positive motivator.
Does music serve that function for you to some degree? Does it sort of allow you access to that feeling of possibility? Is that your primary way of getting there?
Definitely, yeah. I would honestly, and I know maybe this is like people say this kind of thing, and it really is. It's kind of it's just what I do. Like I really love making sounds and music,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter if they're songs or not. Like I love just being in this moment of like getting lost with something. And if I didn't share things, there's a lot of songs I don't share. There's a lot of things I don't share that I love,
Yeah.
that are a part of me. It's not like it's not like I only share the things that I think are good. I just don't share everything. And I
Yeah.
think that's important in art, in music, and in practice, and in life. I think it's a fun thing, and I get there with all of that stuff. I think more so connecting with what's an exciting layer to that is connecting with other musicians or other artists or other visual artists or other writers, people in different mediums. It becomes like this really fascinating conversation, because you can then stimulate things that you've never experienced with that, and know that like you're never ever making the thing that's like final. Like I think when I'm and what I mean by that is like you're not for me at least, there's no version of me, there's no like brand of me, there's no like genre of me. I don't really make anything that sounds, for me at least, I don't think I make anything that's like a part of like a scene or something. Like I think everything I've ever wanted to make was just whatever happened that day for me, or documenting ideas that I want to continue to be a part of. And it's worked, it's worked in some ways in a positive way, and it's definitely made life harder for me in a lot of other ways, in terms of like having some kind of like I don't know. It's taken a long time to get here. I'm 41, so it's like there's definitely things that have been hard.
Well, yeah, like are you talking about how having a brand can be very beneficial when it comes to making music in terms of a career? Is that sort of what you're alluding to some degree? And the fact that you don't ever settle into one, or haven't, settled into just one sort of mode or style or genre. Is that sort of what you're referencing?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think, sometimes there's like there's so much that I love and enjoy, and so much that's a part of what I do as well. And you when I decided to kind of work with other people in terms of labels, in terms of like a booking agent to help me get some shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then they operate in worlds that are like way more boxed in, with parameters that are like necessary, like, okay, well, what does this person do, and if they can't talk about it because I can't talk about it, I'm like, then we're like going nowhere. So I mean it like that. So I think that's been the hardest challenge, is like coming up with not coming up with, but understanding my own what I'm doing, and finding language to talk to people about what I do. So that's like a long, long, long process.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And there are artists whose music I love, who at various points in their career have said, like, this is what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, now I'm going to do this. Like, I think of somebody like David Bowie to some degree, right? Where it's like, I love Bowie's records, and I love the different sort of guises that he'll put on, where it's like, now I'm this guy, now I'm that guy. And I do believe that that can yield really interesting stuff. To some degree, you do that too, right? Where you're like, I'm going to play with this idea, or I'm going to play with this style for this. But at the same time, I find, like, listening through the discography and hearing the way you will approach like a new age idea, or a disco-y idea, or a folky idea. It's like, I don't know, man. To me, it strikes me as this, like, to get back to that idea of a person as a galaxy, this like comfort with the idea that we are not just one single thing, or that we are a lot of possible things, and that none of us is, because that's the idea that can become very frustrating about we opened up our talk talking a little bit about Twitter, and like anybody who's ever spent time on Twitter, and I've unfortunately spent way too much time on Twitter, you recognize this thing where it's like you tweet something that's not in keeping with the other stuff you tweet, and you just sort of see people like not 100% sure how to react with that. You know what I mean? Because it's like they want you to do the one thing you do, or the few things you do. So anyway, I think about how, as an artist, so much, it seems to me like you draw so much energy from the lack of constraints. Does that seem right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think the only constraints are like my body.
You sure?
Um,
Sure.
and I think that's what I want my music to reflect the most. It's
Yeah.
like I've lived in so many different cities over the past like 25 years. I've um my body changes shape, my voice has changed,
Yeah. Yeah.
my knees are getting older. Things change, and I feel like that's um I think there's and I guess I'm trying to make this metaphor in the sense that there's a thread in everything that I do for sure. But I think the things around that thread change so much, just like me, just like my body, and so there's an opportunity for you to kind of like discover that about yourself, and not try to like continually live thinking you're trying to like adhere to something that people thought you were, or you maybe thought you were, like maybe just like being like, cool, like this is me for the next 10 years possibly, I don't know, but I
Yeah.
can maybe move myself into a different direction too. And I know that I've done that, and I think that's what I wanted to do with this record specifically. I think after the last two records, Private Energy and This Is How You Smile, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew before I made This Is How You Smile. It's funny. When I was making when I was making a song, I got asked to do something for the Adult Swim singles a
Yeah.
few years ago, and I wrote two songs, and one was called "Come Be Me," which is the one that I released, and the other one was called "País Nublado." And I remember I was like trying to decide which direction I wanted to go with, and I was like, okay, whichever one I don't go with, that's the way the album is gonna be. So I was like, "This Is How You Smile" is gonna, at least that song is gonna be on the next record. So then País Nublado like got pushed to the side. So I was like, I'm gonna use País Nublado as like a aesthetic template to build a lot of different worlds off of that. And then Come Be Me, I'm gonna return to that, but I'm gonna release it now. But I'm gonna return to Come Be Me later on and make really like explore a lot more passionately and deeply what it's gonna be like. And that's what I feel like Far In is like an echo of that.
Yeah, yeah. I like that idea of like saving something for the next thing too. You know what I mean? Or like saying like setting it aside and then allowing yourself the freedom. To get back to the sort of like the material side of the conversation. So you were in Marfa for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got out and you went to New York for a while, right?
Yeah, so we finally left Marfa September, like early September, and got back to New York in September of last year. And then I just locked myself in my home studio and worked and wrote and recorded a lot. And then went to the studio where I recorded a lot of and worked on most of This Is How You Smile, and then made the whole record there from about like November to April
Yeah.
of this year, and didn't stop. Less rigorous, but just as much time.
Yeah, yeah. So what did it feel like getting back to New York? I mean, obviously you then have since departed New York, but when you returned to New York, how did it feel? Did it feel, for lack of a better term, like you were back home?
It did and it didn't. I think we had been like viewing it from such a distance, and then seeing all the the hard moments that New Yorkers were going through, the tragedy that New Yorkers were experiencing through COVID. And so that was
Yeah.
something we were going to be like very sensitive to. And then not just COVID, but through a lot of the protests from last summer, and just knowing that there there was a new feeling that was palpable for sure. And it was exciting in a lot of respects, but there was also the economic
Yeah.
like void because of COVID. So it felt like a lot of people had this energy to participate and be in community with each other, but then there was also like this like, no one can work, and there was just like a strange limbo. So we were kind of disconnected in that respect, where it was like it didn't feel the same in just on a superficial level in terms of like the economic stuff, but it in the
Yeah.
people level still we're still connected to that. But it was hard to know how to act, because it was like uh everybody was still wearing masks, and so there was just like there's all this like, and if you're walking around New York, it's just weird. Not There's a lot of people you're just like walking by and you're like, I think I know that person, but I don't know, and I don't want to like stop and be like, do I
Yeah.
know you? And you have to pull off your mask like, oh, I don't know you. Okay. So there was a lot
That
of
would be a strange interaction for sure.
yeah, there's a lot of that, but it felt good more than anything. New York is still somewhere that I love deeply.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel alien.
So what motivated you and Christy to say, okay, we're going someplace else?
It was just we wanted to just try something new. I
Yeah.
think that was more than anything. I think there's uh we've never been in any kind of like super fortunate like economic situation where like it didn't really matter where we lived in New York. So it was always hard to struggle to be able to afford and find somewhere that was
Yeah.
that was easy to pay, pay rent. And then also most of the places we would try to have our studios in our house, because we couldn't really get a studio
Sure.
outside. So there was, we've always kind of been just like living on the cusp of like, damn, like I don't know what we can pay for right now. So that's always been part of it. And it wasn't like we moved there and that was the situation. It kind of just when we first moved there, we got really lucky, and we were living somewhere in a really affordable way, and it just nothing felt that hard. And then it kind of just there was like a landslide of like things that happened where we had to move a bunch, and
Yeah.
it just started to feel like a cycle of just like living somewhere and moving and living somewhere and moving. It never felt like we just never felt stable. and I don't know. I could go off the deep end about a lot of like about just kind of what it means to, I guess, participate in all that as well, and also fight for it. Um, so I think right now we wanted to just try to refocus our energy and see if we could live somewhere else for a minute. And also we have this show coming up next year, the Marfa show
Mm-hmm.
at Ballroom, and we were like, let's just like go somewhere and just work for like however many months until the show, and then go on tour next year and just see what happens.
Yeah.
Might go back to New York. You never know. It's just more than anything, it was just taking a little journey away from New York again.
Yeah. Yeah. And have you found, I mean, have you been just like, have you been writing a lot there? It sounds like, I mean, you went there in part to work. I mean, has stuff come to you pretty consistently, or do you always write? That's a better way to ask that question, actually. Are you pretty much always working on music?
I am, yeah. Sound ideas and music and work and visual things, and there's always something happening for sure, and which is, it's kind of like part of my day to day more than anything. It isn't some things can be work because we find work to do.
Sh-
We gotta make money, but
Sure.
but for the most part, I'm getting to a place where I, I have a lot more time to make, which is really cool. And I think that was like the thing I always wanted when I first started taking this seriously, in
Yeah.
terms of knowing that I could do this, or knowing that it was something that I really enjoyed to do, like recognizing it in myself. So I think it's kind of funny. It reminds me, these days remind me of like my early days of making music. Like when I first went to college and I got like my first MPC in 1999, and it reminds me of those days because I would just like get up and just like make beats and like
Yeah.
sample, like work on stuff, and then go to class. So I feel like the same thing is happening right now, like what was happening back in those days. It's it's um it's really special right now.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that was when, so you're talking about, were you in Georgia when you're talking about that? Like, is that sort of when things, you really got into making music, or was this before that, or?
Yeah, it was in Georgia. I went to school in Savannah College of Art and Design, and prior to that, I had gotten a computer. Well, I didn't get a computer. My brother had a computer, and I would make. I think I got like Pro Tools like 2.0 or something like that, via some like music making magazine, because I was really into um a lot of electronic music
Yeah.
in like the mid 80s, and so I would buy a lot of magazines that talked about it, and there was like an ad for like you could like write and get a free Pro Tools CD, and it was like Pro Tools 2.0, and I got that when I was in high school, and I started like recording little beats that I would make on the computer. And then when I went to college, I went to school for animation and video and film, and took a sound class. And when I took that sound class, our professor was I mean, I view him as like a mentor. He really emphasized and shared with us like a lot of like experimental and like avant-garde work, and really shared with us like a lot of stuff that was things that were out of my world. Like the things that I was exposed to were like I didn't even realize, but my cousin would give me CDs, or my brother would share stuff like a lot of Tortoise, or like Chicago type stuff, or like things that were on Warp Records. And so that was like
Yeah.
high years, and then learning, where the evolution of that, where it came from, and so how some of those guys were influenced by the stuff that I was starting to learn, and kind of connecting the dots with some of that stuff. So it was really those were like early days for me.
What kind of stuff? What do you remember? What was his name? The professor?
Oh, Matt Akers.
And what kind of stuff was he showing you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm trying to remember now.
I completely get it, by the way. It's like anytime somebody asks me, like, what I'm listening
Yeah,
to or whatever, I just immediately slips out. But
Yeah, I mean, it was stuff based in installation, and I can't believe I'm just spacing out on this right now, but I couldn't even like I can't believe I can't reference anything off the top of my head, but in terms of the process, he was explaining to us a lot of things that were happening,
Yeah.
obviously, I guess, look, this is probably generic, but I think it's just an obvious thing. He would, sharing ideas of uh like John Cage stuff and like David Tudor stuff,
Yeah.
and trying to think who else, but stuff within like that world of uh you know white dude academia.
Yeah.
But it was like my first exposure to like this permission to be out
Yeah.
of these borders that were already perceived in some respects, and so that was like that was cool for me. I was like, oh shit, you can do this. You can do. I didn't realize you could just make stuff like this. And I was
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna make this. I want to find these sounds too.
No, absolutely. That's fascinating. Were you on the electronic side of things? Were you into live things? Were you into clubs or raves or things like that? I mean, was that a part of it for you?
Absolutely, yeah. When I was in high school, there used to be this thing on South Beach called Beat Camp, and we would go, and downstairs was like the Raga Jungle Room where there would be a lot of MCs. This must have been like 98,
Yeah.
maybe 99, I don't know. And then upstairs was the more experimental room where people were playing like IDM type stuff, but even just weirder spaced out shit. Things that didn't sound like anything else. And that was just like my first exposure beyond like going to the record store in South Florida, Uncle Sam's, and getting like magazines and whatever mixtapes I could find.
Yeah.
That was like a really like exciting moment for me going and seeing this stuff in real life.
Did you like to go between the rooms, like kind of like
Oh
spend a little time in one, then go spend a little time in the other? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. It was just exciting. I mean, and to be that young. And there was also a radio station in Miami. It was like a pirate radio station that had electronic music. It was called WOMB, WOMB,
Ooh.
and so there was like that as well. So it was like kind of just like exposure to like things that I hadn't ever heard of before.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of stuff did you grow up hearing? Like, what kind of stuff were you hearing around the house, or what was some of the first music that you got into, even before kind of getting into that stuff?
Yeah. It Well, my family's from Ecuador, and at my house there was a lot of Latin American, like pop Latin American music, and like danceable tunes,
Yeah.
and Latin American pop, it was what like just it was common for us to hear it. Maybe, I thought maybe the world, everybody knew about this stuff, but it was just kind of like very specific to the region, and
Sure.
the artists well, in Ecuador there was like famous singer, his name's Julio Jaramillo, and then like in Ecuador there was like a cult following for a band called Los Iracundos, and then my dad really liked Piero, and then there's another like pop singer like Rafael that my mom loved, but then there was also a lot of like us living in South Florida, there's a lot of the Caribbean
Sure.
dance music influence, and so there was like so much like merengue and then bachata and then uh cumbia.
Yeah.
So that was just like typical in terms of like the house, and then there was the radio, right? And so the local radio in Florida is like in the 80s was Miami bass
Yeah.
and electro and freestyle, and like that's what I was hearing on the radio, and like hearing 808s and hearing 303s and hearing chopped up, pitched up and pitched down vocals, sampled, and hearing samples. And so that was like those were sounds that were like permeating out of every car, rolling down the street, and that that was definitely absorbed into my like subconscious.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you start, I mean, so what you signed to Asthmatic Kitty in 2000,
2009 was the
2000.
first record. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. 2000. I was gonna say 2010. Yeah, 2009. So how did that happen? How did you get connected with that crew?
Yeah, that's a good question. So prior to that, me kind of referencing your question about electronic music in Miami, as soon as I went to school and college to college, I started making a lot of music, and a friend of mine was working with some labels that were part of like some of those parties that I had gone to in Miami, and they were putting out hip hop and electronic music, and then I ended up releasing with a couple labels, different projects for a long time, and so one of the people at Asthmatic Kitty had been following one of those projects and asked me to remix one of their artists. And then parallel to that, I was already working on Helado Negro, and I was like, oh, you should check out this thing that I'm working on.
Yeah.
And they got excited about it, and it was just like really organic. So it was like the first time I had worked with. I had worked with prior to that. I had worked with like three labels, and they were like, and I was like 19 when I was like first talking to my first label when I got signed to my first label, and a lot of like there was just like a lot of hype and big talk about what was going to happen. And then so when I signed to Asthmatic Kitty, I remember specifically thinking like when they told me they're like, oh, like just let us know if you want anything or what you'll need to make the record. And I was like, oh shit, this is crazy. And I was like, huh? I was like, yeah, I need like I think I was like I need like $2,000 to make the record, you know. And I was like, I just thought that was like a crazy amount of money to ask for. It was the most. I know a lot of people don't even get any money, but it was like I didn't even know what I was doing
Yeah.
in that respect. I was just like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, you know? And that was like a crazy feeling because I just felt like very supported. I mean, like at the time I think I got that money and then like paid rent and like utilities and student loans with that, you know?
Yeah.
So it was like that money just went from one place to another. It didn't
You didn't like immediately go buy like a really nice Les Paul or something. You know what I mean?
nothing, nothing changed other than I owed a record.
Yeah.
And
That's a cool
and
position to find yourself in, though. That must have been exciting. You know what I mean? Like you said, feeling supported like that. That's a big feeling.
It was. And so I was about to turn 30 and I was just finishing this record. And I kind of felt like, I was like, what am I doing? This is like starting this new project. I wasn't really sure what was going on. And it was amazing. Throughout the time that I was with Asthmatic Kitty, they were really supportive and treated me in this really exciting way in terms of I guess what I'm trying to get to is that one of the first conversations I had, and it was with Michael Kaufman, who brought me to the label. He was like, look, we're not interested in your first record. We're interested in your like fifth or sixth record. Like we want to, and what he meant by that is like we
Yeah.
want to cultivate you into the artist that you want to become, and ultimately make sure you're continuously happy through, all those stages of the relationship with us, and I felt like that was like the thing that I needed to hear, and I had never heard before with any of the other people I had ever worked with. The other people I had ever worked with, it was just kind of like everybody was winging it.
Yeah.
There were indie labels, nobody knew any, and it's not disparaging indie labels, but I mean, a lot of times everybody has as much experience as you do, and sometimes it's close to none.
Yeah.
And so it was nice to have a conversation with someone who had more perspective on different ways you could cultivate and harness the things that you wanted to do. And it was a really great relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and obviously it opened you up to, I mean, I remember like paying attention to Asthmatic Kitty, like pretty, I was about to just say like I paid attention religiously because there was actually probably a religious component to me at that time. You know what I mean? Maybe not then. But anyway, I paid attention to everything that came out on Asthmatic Kitty, and I remember hearing that record and thinking how great it was. And then following your career over the time since, as you've gone through these different, you've worked with different, labels, you've worked in these different sort of contexts, as we've talked about, kind of moving back and forth in a very fluid way through a lot of different styles and a lot of different formats and stuff. Listening to this new one, the thing that really strikes me about all the songs from it is just how whole it feels, and how I wonder if the last year or the last 2 years at this point, it's I guess, where we're like looking at this time and like started recognizing that, this is a strange time. When you look at this specific record, what strikes you about the way it's come together, and do you feel like it is? What does this record say about you that the others don't? I guess is what I'm trying to get at. I'm very curious about.
Yeah. Well, I think I don't think it's, for me, I don't think it's they're not achievements.
Sure. Yeah.
They're not climbing like a mountain, and they're not building a house. They're like milestones in my own life. And so each album I made is a different version of where I was in different places. I'm not like I'm not trying to outdo myself, And so, and I know that's hard, because I think people look at things with a critical mind in terms of like the last record, This Is How You Smile. It garnered like all this press, it got all this like these positive reviews, and that helps so much with like the industry world, right? It helps so much for you to be able to get a show and maybe charge more money or hire more, so you can hire a bigger band, and maybe you can have a record that you can record in a fancy studio or whatever. Like,
yeah,
you can do things, but it doesn't change the fact that like you're probably going to be in a completely different place mentally and like physically, and I've always known that. I'm lucky that that didn't happen early on in my career. I've made so much music, and I've released so much that right as I was about to release, or no, when I was like making This Is How You Smile, I had zero expectations. I just wanted to make the record that I wanted to make at that time, and make the best record I could at the time with what I had. And when I was finished, I was like, I'm done. Cool. Like, whatever happens, happens.
yeah,
I wasn't stressed about it at all. I wasn't like expecting anything. I was like, honestly, I was like expecting it to do everything that I had done before. And I feel like more so with Far In, I feel even more comfortable with myself. I don't feel like I felt like, I guess the way I'm trying to put it is I realized that after I had finished Private Energy and I finished This Is How You Smile, I realized I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, and I felt more comfortable with myself. And I felt like Far In is kind of like one of the first times I have like a full expression of everything I've ever wanted to share, in a way that it felt not dense or confused or just fillerish. It feels like, for me, I focus so much on like each song being the exact expression that the song needed to be, more so than I ever have with any other record, with any other song.
yeah.
And I feel like that. I feel like I'm just more comfortable more than anything.
Yeah,
with myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you listen to I don't know how often you put your record on or don't, but that feeling of feeling comfortable with yourself, that's awesome that has increased as time has gone on. I'm sure that there's a part of that that's just very natural, right? We like keep doing things and we become more comfortable, but it also, that comfort kind of comes through in a weird way, because I feel like the record has a comforting quality. I feel like the record has a loving quality. I feel like the record brings a little bit of that thing that you're describing feeling for yourself, I don't know, it's not hard for me to hear that in the music too. You know what I mean? That like a kind of acceptance and a kind of very I don't know, it's a beautiful record. So
and just to kind of like um maybe clear up even more so what I mean by comfort. I don't feel comfortable with what I'm doing. I don't feel like I've to go back to like this idea of like me as like a genre or something like that.
yeah.
I feel comfortable in exploring and doing whatever the hell I want. I feel comfortable in feeling like I can share what I want and know that that's what I wanted to share, and it's not attached uh, a pressure to check off boxes for other people. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really special place for me because it's not that I want to stay here. It's just I want to continue to grow in this feeling.
Yeah. And when I think back, like, yeah, exactly what you're talking about, that feeling of like you're going to sing in the language that you choose to sing in for the song. You know, you're going to, you know, it's not like, it doesn't sound to me like it's ever been a thing where you're like, I'm going to purposefully defy expectations that people have of me. You know what I mean? Or I'm going to flip the script intentionally. You know, it doesn't sound like that's really the way that you motivate yourself. That doesn't sound like that's where the motivation comes from. But it also doesn't sound like you're worried about if that happens, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. No, and I think that's like, I think if anybody's been following along, and I think some people are just jumping on, as of even this record,
Yeah.
I think if we were to like listen back to like all the things that I've released under Helado Negro, I think they'd be like, what is, if someone listened to like an Island Universe story song and then listen to a song from the first record, it's just like, there's aesthetics that are like wildly different, but there's like a constant thread through them all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's awesome. That's a beautiful thing. I mean, that's you, right? Like that's the idea, is that in terms of a person being a galaxy, in terms of a person being a genre, like it's like there doesn't need to be any limiting. I want to close, I want to ask, it's like a slightly different question, or a slightly stranger one maybe. I don't know. The other day on Twitter, you mentioned that you'd called it quits on The Sopranos, and that you were like, I'm not watching The Sopranos. And I took note of it because I saw that tweet the same day I read that Will Staley essay about like why is every young person in America watching The Sopranos or whatever.
Oh, I don't think I read that. I'm sorry. What
No,
was that all about?
oh, you don't have to apologize for it, for sure. It was basically just sort of a discussion of I don't know, American dissatisfaction, and the sort of like the sense of emptiness that might certain institutions inspire a feeling of emptiness versus what maybe they once did for a lot of people, and I think that it's sort of just this idea of, but you had talked specifically about not watching Sopranos or calling it quits on it because you were sick of the like violence in the entertainment that you watch, or this is not what you're not what you're feeling right now, right?
Yeah, I'm sure, and not that I'm sure, the things that I observed and felt, like, I think there's some like amazing writing in The Sopranos, and I think there's some amazing like acting, without a doubt.
Sure.
Like, that's like not disparaging that. I think ultimately the thing that feels really off is like this need to like be entertained by the worst things possible. And I think it's just like whatever. I think it's not new. And it's just we have like the willpower to choose what we want, but we're definitely fed a lot of the same thing. So it's kind of hard to sift through the shit. And I've read something a friend of mine wrote, and I'm gonna really maybe paraphrase this in the worst of ways, but he was talking about Goodfellas, and I really like that movie too. And he was referencing, I guess, like the third act of Goodfellas, how like the thing that Scorsese did was he didn't let these guys get away with it. It
Sure.
wasn't like these guys, after they did all this terrible shit, treated all these humans horribly, the most violent and terrible things in the world, then they got to go home and like give their kid like a cup of chocolate milk, and then everybody felt for them.
Right.
It was like, no, there is no, people don't get off the hook like that, and I think that is a reality, I think, that should be shared more than like the things that I was feeling when I was watching The Sopranos. I was like, there's like this like violence that's being portrayed, and then these guys are just let off the hook all the time.
Sure. Sure.
And I think that type of storytelling it felt like repetitive. Every episode felt like that's what they were saying. Sure, there was like beautiful nuance inside each episode, but it was like, it felt like at the end of each episode they got to eat together as a family.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is terrible. This is garbage.
I love that. I love The Sopranos, and I love a lot of the elements. I actually didn't mean to be like, yeah, defend your take on The Sopranos, because I respect your take on The Sopranos. I'm not. Yeah, I'm gonna take you to task about it. What I was interested though, I mean, it made me think about violence. It made me think about violence in the entertainment that I watch, and I love a lot of really violent entertainment, and it made me absolutely call some things into question and just think about it, because it's good to be thoughtful about what we do and what we watch and what we sort of engage with. But something that I was thinking about and what I wanted to see was like, what are things that you watch that make you feel creatively liberated or not? Are there things like, because when it comes to entertainment, are there things that you put on where you like, when an episode finishes or a movie finishes, you go, I feel better about the universe than I did before. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there was a movie in that tweet, in my tweet thread, that I thought about that too. I was like, not just like slinging mud at something and then just walking away. I was like, maybe it's always an opportunity if you're going to talk shit to like bring something to the table. So it's not just something that you're doing to have a scandalous moment. And what I talked about was a movie that I watched recently called The Truffle Hunters. And I just thought it was just really beautiful. There's like a documentary about this amazing group of older gentlemen who live in this northern region of Italy that hunt for truffles, and they've been doing it for a long time, and they're just these old guys, and there's just like it's a really beautiful portrait of life and people getting older and things being lost and gone forever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like there's a heavy hand in there that's trying to manipulate you into a narrative. It just feels like life happening in front of you, and you're experiencing someone's situation without it having to be so heavy. And it's sad. There's a lot of sad moments in that movie. It's not like it's more realistic, I guess, and it's more interesting, but it's beautifully shot and it's beautifully assembled. And I was like, this is really inspiring to watch something like this, because it is like a lot more real to me than kind of like fictional violence for amusement.
Yeah.
And I think there was another, I was actually going to call the record something else. I was actually going to call the record Until the End of the World. And it was based off of this Wim Wenders movie that I love. And I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
I watched it right at the start of the pandemic for the first time.
Really?
For the first time. I watched it right at the start of the pandemic.
And I love that movie for that reason. I love the movie because it's so similar to that documentary. It's like there's like these constant conflicts, but it's like an organic life. So it feels like normal life. It's like when you have conflicts in your life, it's not like then it ends, or it ends in this really dramatic way. I understand that's how a lot of fictional writing is, but there's something about these types of movies that are testament that you can make things you don't have to hold people's hands through like so much, and you can give people permission to have different types of experiences throughout these types of like, storytelling.
I loved that movie precisely for what you're talking about, which is to say it's a different kind of storytelling than we're so used to seeing, not just because it's really long. It is really long. But it is like, it's so patient, and it unfolds in a way that is a lot more like life, even to the point where as you're watching it, the characters are struggling with their own desire to watch things, you know what I mean? Instead of do them or whatever. And you're like, however many hours into this movie, and you're like, oh shit, is Wim calling me out, at least a little bit? Because he is, But I love that. Yeah, I love that. And good soundtrack too, right? I mean, that Peter Gabriel song, Blood of Eden, is so... That's a... Yeah.
It is. It's sick. Even it's fascinating because I really love that movie. It really had a huge influence on my new record. I wanted my new record to be long. In a lot of respects, the songs are long, and the record... The record was originally like 23 songs, and it was like,
wow.
I think I was trying to make it like, I don't know, it was like really long, and I had to cut a lot of things out. And then and also there was I had collected for the past few years. I'd been collecting a lot of those recordings, those Pygmy recordings that they were like highlighting in the movie a lot, where she was playing them back a lot.
Yeah.
And and I was loving. I was like, this is crazy. There was so much like crosstalk with like a lot of things that I had already been working with in my own mind with concepts and stuff, and so it was cool.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. The new record's beautiful. And it was really, really, really nice getting to sit down with you and talk with you and see you in person, sort of, via the magic of the internet, But yeah, I really loved it, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
Likewise, Jason. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Jason Woodbury. I write, host, and produce Transmissions. Our audio is edited by Andrew Horton. Sarah Goldstein and Jonathan Mark Walls create visual assets for the show. And our top of the show announcer and executive producer is Aquarium Drunkard founder Justin Gage. Don't miss his Aquarium Drunkard show on Sirius XM every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. California time. One of the all-time best radio shows in the biz for my money. Like I said at the top of the show, this is the penultimate episode of this season. We are going to be taking a break after next week's show just to get through the winter holidays and, of course, finish up that best of the year list on Aquarium Drunkard, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But we do have one more episode coming up next week, and it's a great one. Steve Berlin of Los Lobos joins me to discuss their new album, Native Sons, as well as lots of moments from his fascinating career, the LA cowpunk scene, and we talk a little bit about Paul Simon too. So tune into that. Until next week, stay safe. I'll speak with you more soon.